more time. Good morning, men. Good morning. Tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Justin Newcomb, head football coach at Stevenson High School. You might see the boots I'm wearing right now. Spent 8 years in the Army. Captain, got out as captain of the Army Reserve. And one of the neat things that Tim did there, share some gratitude, is something that we did every day. We call hunt the good stuff. Sometimes you just need to find that good stuff to search for each and every day. That's not a silly activity. That's like special forces stuff, doing that every day in the Army when I was down at Fort Benning. So pretty remarkable there. If you don't do that in your daily life, I would highly encourage to do that when we go. Said that I coach at Stevenson. Proud of that. That's just what I do. That's not who I am. And I encourage you to understand, we're all football players in here, former players in here. That's not who you are. That's what you do. I want to make sure we understand that point as we get going here. So the topic of my talk today is going to be the best version of you. That picture right there means everything to me in this off season. Those are two football teams that just got done playing a game. At the very end of this game, they come together for a prayer. Player-led, outstanding job of doing it. And one of the guys in that picture is here with us here today, Caden, Bollinger, in doing that. It's a tremendous time to be able to do that. What all this comes down to is, can we duplicate, can we replicate being the best version of you? Next slide. All right, here's our purpose. 3 of them. Can we go ahead and live our lives conform to the person of Jesus? Conform to the person of Jesus. Not to rules, not to certain daily habits, to a person. It's relational. That's what we got to come back to. Number 2, a relentless pursuit of the truth. What is the truth? We live in a time right now where people got to tell you what the truth is. You hit stick somebody in a game and you got to start pounding your chest. It's not the truth. What is the truth? Be in a relentless pursuit of that for the rest of your life. And in that relationship through Jesus is where you're going to find that. And number 3 is be a voice of the word. So many times in our culture, it's not cool to speak out and speak up. And so many times in our culture, where we're at in public school, a lot of people think that you can't speak up and speak out about Jesus. That is wrong. We're called to be a voice, coaches included. Be a voice of the word. Question, how do you want to be remembered? Somebody I really respect and looked up to, got this from him. He said, when people think about me, how do I want to be remembered? I don't want to be remembered. I don't want to be remembered. When people think of me and how we want to be remembered, when they think of me, I want to make sure that they think of him, not me. When people think of you and your reputation that people get so caught up in right now, don't let them think of you. When they think of you, make sure it reflects him. That's how we want to be remembered. Next slide. Okay, moving from a consumer to a servant heart. As a coach, one thing that's happened and changed so much in the world of high school football is transfer. The amount of players that are leaving to go from one school to the next, I don't care if it's high school or college. Somehow this team concept has gotten polluted. And we think right now, many of us approach a team as though we're a consumer. That if the team that we're on, as long as they give me what I want, playing time, if it gives me, maybe as a coach, the ability to call plays, or maybe a program that wins all the time, or a program that's going to get me to the next level, then I'm good, I'm in, as long as they give me what I want. That's called being a consumer. We got to change that mindset and change that approach. And we got to start moving to that team as being a servant, because at some point, we got to recognize that our team is a community. And as a community, it asks something of us. And it asks us to serve the hearts of the people on our team. Our team can be an incredible, powerful force. And you have that ability exactly where you're at right now to serve. And that's what we come here for. There's no place like it on our team and the team that you're in right now. But moving from being a consumer to realizing that this is my family. And in this family, it takes and requires something of you. What can we do right now so that our family can be more the place that it's supposed to be? How can other people know that this is a place of safety? What can we do to encourage one another to take responsibility for our lives? And this is not your coach's task. These are the players' task. Our team right now can really be known as a place where people encounter Jesus. It really can be. It can be a place where the Holy Spirit is alive and thriving. for what you can give. Everybody on a team understands that you have somebody on your team that needs you. They need an outlet, they need a voice. There's many of us that go through these silent battles, and you never know it unless you acknowledge it. And it might be somebody in here who needs that. When we talk about being a voice for the word, when you approach your team, what can you give? That's what we're talking about. To do that, you gotta be the best version of you. Next slide. Your team is your church. Your team is your community. Begin to ask, what can I give? And how do I take care of this family? And stop asking, what can this team do for me? That's a huge mindset. We got to change our perspective. We all go through life sometimes with these goggles, these perspectives. I'm challenging you to put down the glasses of today's culture and put on the glasses of a biblical worldview. It'll change the way you see things, and it'll change the experience that happens to you. Next slide. What does it mean to be the very best version of you? Next slide. We have this saying in our program that I'd like to take with you. Person over player. Person over player. Who you are as a person totally outshines who you are as a player. When I see Caden, one of my players, on the field right there, I love the way he plays, but I understand that he is a better person than he is a player. We have to recognize that. Who you are as a person far exceeds who you are as a player. I think we can get to a point now that when you start playing this great game again, you're doing so to reflect upon him. Every moment you repurpose, when that player has a great game or that player doesn't have a great game, it reflects more on you as a person. How can you serve him? In that moment, you just had a great play. How does that reflect on him? You just went through some adversity. You had an overtime loss, which we did, Coach Ryan's. Doesn't matter that that happened to us as a team. How do we reflect on that moment to shine on him and give him thanks? Person over player. Next slide. Okay, what does that look like to be the best version of you? Just take a moment and think. The very best version of you. What does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like when you wake up in the morning and put your feet down and you know it's going to be the absolute very best version of you? What are you doing? What are you not doing? Best version of you. Your brain gets fired up to think about what that looks like when you go through that day of being the very best version of you. No distractions. Best version of you. Day after day. Next slide. So in the Army, we had these daily battle rhythms. What's a daily battle rhythm? Anybody know? It's a daily battle rhythm. Go ahead.
I'm going to cheat because I was in the Marine Corps.
That still counts, by the way. I was Army, but that Marine Corps still counts. I'm just teasing.
A daily battle rhythm is your routine. So we wake up, make bed. You use the restroom, you shower, you shave, and then you go to PT, and then you do that, and you go to chow, and then you go to training. It's your VR. It's a daily battle. It's the routine that you get into every day. You get a task done as soon as you wake up, and you finish.
Coach, that's a great explanation of it. Helps develop your routine for the day. It keeps you on task. You wake up with a purpose of what you need to do, and it keeps you doing what you're supposed to do. When you fall out of that rhythm and you fall out of that routine, you leave yourself susceptible to the things of the world. I'm challenging here to develop a daily battle rhythm that's consistent with the best version of you. What do you want that to look like? The Marine Corps had their version. We have ours. Students have yours. What does that look like for you to develop daily battle rhythms? Here's a couple that we thought of. Spiritual development. What's your prayer life look like? To be in a relationship with someone, you have to give time to someone. And the best way to do that is through prayer. How do you do that? Daily behavior patterns. Mastering self and sin and different relationships. Next slide. Person over player, daily battle rhythms. I'm going to challenge you with this. As coaches, we go through this all the time. If we have A+ game plan, we're going into a game week, and I got A+ strategy, really believe in it. A+ strategy, A+ game plan, but we execute C+ behavior, what type of results are we going to get? Are we going to get A+ results? No. I don't care how good your strategy is. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do this. You get a great strategy. But if you don't out-behave yourself, you'll never execute and become the person that you want to be. A+ strategy is great, and you're going to leave here today with all kinds of different strategies to take home and to take with you. And that's great, and it's needed. At the end of the day, the behavior needs to match that. Daily battle rhythms will help you when we go. This is what it looks like. Next slide. All right, prayer life. What does it look like? It's different for each person. It can sometimes be the first part of the day. First thing you do when you wake up. Sometimes it can be the best part of your day. Whatever that looks like for you. For some of the coaches in here, prayer life with your spouse, with your kids. Alone, in a car, at work. Here's the point. Love requires sacrifice. Relationship requires time. And I think you've all heard this before. How do you spell love? It's not L-O-V-E, it's T-I-M-E. You need to spend time in prayer, listening, and reading up on the Word. Next slide. Mastering sin. What Christ asks of us is putting God first and self second. Somebody said this to me before and it stuck with me. I want to share it with you. Next slide. When you look at the word sin, it's spelled S-I-N. 3 letters. The central letter of the word sin is I. What does that mean? Sin would not be sin if it wasn't dominated by pride and self. When we think about ourself and we think about I, that's what leads us to sin. Next slide. How easy it is. Take the same word sin now and replace the I and get rid of the I. And replace it with O for others. See, the call of Christ is to abandon all personal ambitions in order to serve Him. The movement from sin to son is the shifting of just one letter. Yet it can be so hard to let go of I and to think of others. But that's what the Son has called us to do. Next slide. Galatians chapter 5, verse 16 through 17. I say that live by the Spirit, and you will certainly not gratify the desire of flesh. For the flesh has desires against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are opposed to each other, so that you may not do what you want. Walking by the Spirit allows for us to become the very best version of us with a God-centered conscience. Next slide. Leadership 101. I'm going to wrap up with this. I'm going to bring up Caden with me. Next slide. Here's the challenge. Has anybody heard the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat? What does a thermometer do? Say it again? Absolutely. Put a thermometer somewhere, it tells you the temperature of the room. You can walk into a space and you can immediately tell the temperature of the room. When we think about leadership, we don't need thermometers. We already know what the temperature is out there. What does a thermostat do? What does it do? Changes the temperature of the room. Leadership, you. Be a voice. You're called to be a thermostat, not to fit in with everybody else. You're called to change the temperature in the room. At some point, you're going to be in a moment that some of your friends are going to get caught up doing silly things. Instead of being a thermometer and acknowledging it, you're going to be called to be a thermostat to change it. And that's going to change somebody's life. Have the courage and have the conviction to be a thermostat. Change the temperature of the room. That's what you're called to do, and that's what you have the power to do, given by the Holy Spirit. Next slide. You were created for others. You were the idea of Jesus, and you were not created to be selfish. Next slide. Guys, this is my last slide here. I'm going to call Caden up. Stay on time. You have one mission in life, and that's to serve God. There's 3 things I want you to leave here with. Number 1, you are loved. Jesus came for you. I I want to make sure I make this clear. Jesus didn't come for y'all, for all of us. He came for you. Des, he came for you. You. Coach Yasso, he came for you. It's different. Not y'all. You. You are loved. You're not alone, Braden. You are not alone. Those silent battles, you are not alone. You've got to know that and hold on to that. Number 3, God knows what He's doing. Just trust Him. And how often it is we need to hear just those 3 things every day. You are loved, you are not alone, and God knows what He's doing. Guys, thank you for your time. Before we move on, I got to call up a very special player of mine, and that's Caden Bollinger. Coach Ryan has talked about name. Come on up here, Caden. So this kid's a senior now, and I've always pronounced his name. How did I always pronounce your name?
My last name?
Yep.
Bollinger.
And how are you supposed to say it?
Bollinger.
Got it wrong all the time. And he's graduating here in another month or 2, and we're finally going to get it right. But this is Caden. He's one of the most extraordinary players I've ever coached. Excuse me. And I'm excited to hear what he's got to share. Caden.
So, my name's Caden Bollinger. You guys can from what he said. What I kind of want to share with you guys was kind of how I've been, what my kind of path has been and my journey has been for my faith. And so, ever since I was really little, like a tiny little kid, my parents always forced me to go to church and go to youth groups because our church had youth groups. And every time I went, or every time I go, I wasn't very into it. I don't know. There's a lot of people here right now who are in their journals and in their notes and they're writing stuff down. That was never me. I never did that. I was the person who sat in the far back corner and I would just be waiting till the time was done so I could go get lunch with my kid. Something that I want to say is that what got me out of that was a person. His name was Mike. Amazing person. Now he was somebody who took the kid who was sitting in the back, who wasn't doing anything. Clearly didn't, he didn't answer questions, he wasn't a part of the discussions, even in small groups. After they were done with the big youth group, they take everybody in the smaller groups, based on your age and who you were. And even in those groups, I'd be in the far corner, in the back. I wouldn't be talking to anybody or answering any questions. But the guy, his name's Mike, he was our leader. Every single time I was in there, he'd make it a point to pick me out. He'd try to find me in the back, tell me to come sit closer, he'd ask me questions. And so, something that I didn't know about Mike until about a year ago was that during this time, the guy who went out of his way and out of his comfort zone to talk to somebody he didn't know, who didn't want to be there, he was going through one of the toughest divorces I've ever seen somebody go through. It was really rough, and I got the details about it later on that I obviously didn't know about, but he was going through some really tough times internally, but he never let that affect him, and never let that show while he was leading us and taking care of us and mentoring us and going out of his comfort zone. And through high school, I feel like with all of us, we have very tough times. Maybe not that tough, but we have some very tough times where we get stuck in our futures and what we're going to be doing the next few years, what we're going to be doing after high school, especially for seniors. I know I'm getting caught up in that right now, what the plan is going to be. And I feel like it's easy to get super absorbed in what you have going on in your life. Because I know I do that all the time, way too often. And so I feel like what we are here to be able to learn and be able to do that other people might not be able to do is to, even though we have stuff going on in our lives, be able to take the extra step to go out of our comfort zone and find the person sitting in the back of the room, sitting not doing anything, being on their phone, not listening, just waiting for the thing to be done. So find that person and go reach out to what they could possibly do with their lives. Because back then I never thought I was going to be a big person in my faith until somebody went out of their comfort zone. Even though they were comfortable anyways, they still went out of where they were to reach out to a kid who didn't want to be there. And I feel like that's a blessing that you guys have, is that as leaders and as people who know this, have the abilities to be able to go out of your comfort zone and go find people who maybe not be as invested and maybe possibly bring them more into it, more invested to be able to share stuff with other people. And so now I'm obviously here where I am today because of that man, and who knows whose life you guys can change. But yeah, thank you.